see.
I bet he probably went over to Ireland and was like, don't worry, I've been brushing up on my Spanish, this fucking idiot.
No wonder he hated it.
What's happening, everybody? It is time for MLB Live Before Lock here at Stochastic. And if you've been watching baseball content over the course of the day, guess what? It's all nonsensical now. Chris Sale, he was the most important player on the entire slate. He was projected for close to 70% ownership. And guess what? Scratched, not pitching anymore. So with that being the case, Eric and I are breaking down a slate that's entirely different from what the guys talked about in the strategy show this morning. As you're watching this show, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Shout out to Underdog, who is sponsoring our show today. We got Jordan Klein back from Ireland, where he said he enjoyed all the terrible food they had there. But more importantly, Eric is here to break down the slate with me. Eric, what's happening?
Yeah, just another session of hearing Jordan complain about vacation. Loved logging in to hear about how terrible his life is. And then I had to go play golf at a castle. It sucks so bad. Oh, I drank too much Guinness, so my poop goes black. And it's like, whatever, bro. Don't even worry about it, bro. Oh, it's terrible. I had to drink a lot and play golf at castles. I feel terrible for you, Jordan. Hopefully, everybody smash the like button. Give him your condolences, because it's tough to beat Jordan Klein.
Jordan went to Hawaii not all that long ago. He went on vacations to Ireland and Hawaii over the course of like a 3-week span. Yep. He came back. He was so unhappy. He went to Hawaii. He was like, oh no, I'm sunburned because I spent outside in the beautiful weather. There's no way to make him happy.
Can't do it. Honestly, what's going to happen here's what we're going to do. We're going to have you sign a contract, 365 straight days of work. That'll make you feel better, Jordan. I think that's what we've got on the docket. I don't know how California labor laws feel about that, but you know what? We'd feel pretty good, and we'd know you would be taken care of mentally because you'd need that.
That would solve his issue of all the vacations he goes on that he complains about. Something to think about. About it. As his friend, as his boss, I think we're solving a couple of issues here if we get that put into action. Things. Something to think about, Jordan. Something to think about. Shout out to Chris Williams, who gifted out 5 YouTube memberships. As always, Chris, thank you for supporting the channel. We appreciate you. And let's get into talking about this slate, Eric. It's going to be a little bit shorter of a show because the slate is locking early. We no longer have the Chris Sale part of the slate to talk about, which also means there is no expensive pitching on the slate. The most expensive pitcher that we have with no Chris Sale, $8,500 Gavin Williams. We've got 4 pitchers priced over $8K. Bryce Elder now added to the mix. He's at $8,000. Davis Daniel also $8,000. Andrew Abbott, $8,200 against the Rockies. Gavin Williams, $8,500 against the Tigers. Elder's only going to be 12% owned. We got 24% ownership going to Davis Daniel, 40% to Andrew Abbott, 21% to Gavin Williams. If you're paying up for one pitcher in a tournament, Eric, and I know paying up we're kind of using loosely. It's just all these guys are in this 8K range. Who's your preference of these 4 8K pitchers?
It's Andrew Abbott. He gets to have Colorado come out of Coors and show up in his ballpark. Yeah, it's good hitting weather. Yeah, it's good ballpark, 88 degrees, humidity's north of 50%, winds blowing ever so slightly across the field, maybe a little bit out to left. But it's still the Colorado Rockies, and there's a lot of strikeouts to be had here in this spot. I think you tell me Andrew Abbott is going to have a sub 19% K rate for the rest of the year. I'd be surprised. Somebody last year around 24%. He doesn't give up a lot of hits. I believe it's 5 consecutive starts. He's had fewer than 5 hits. So that's ridiculous stuff. 25.1% K rate against Southpaws for the Colorado Rockies. You get a couple of them at the top of the lineup. They're good in Blackman and McMahon, but otherwise, a lot of righties for a lot of strikeouts, hopefully, for Andrew Abbott, my highest owned pitcher.
And another related question to these pitchers, because we've got Gavin Williams, who's making just his 2nd start of the season, opened up the year on the injured list and then was in the minor leagues. And then you've also got Bryce Elder, who was not expected to start until just a couple of hours ago. Now he's pitching today. Chris Sale moved back to tomorrow. What's your expectation for pitch count for these 2 guys? Because it's hard to ignore these pitchers when these are pitchers with talent and it's such a small slate. Do you think they're going to be limited in any sort of way?
So Elder, I don't think so, because he's been at AAA. I don't think that we're going to have any issue for his pitch count here. He's been getting called up from AAA Gwinnett from time to time here. 96 pitches, that was on June 26th. So I do think that no issues as far as pitch count, I think, on the Bryce Elder side of things. It's just a Bryce Elder talent level concern, I would suppose. As for Gavin Williams, he's somebody who does throw high velocity. I think Cleveland wants to be careful with him. We saw 74 pitches up against the White Sox. Part of that could have also been that he got hit up pretty early. 5 earned in that one, ends up taking the L. But 74 pitches there. I've got him around 85 today. I think there could have been a chance for him to get to 80 in the event he had pitched better. I'm not going to put him up to 90 by any means, but I do think because he's a high velocity thrower, somebody that they do want to be careful with coming off of elbow surgery, I'm putting him at 85 and just keeping it there.
Yeah, and I also think he's going to be limited. It's such a small slate. He makes his way in some of my lineups, but I'm a little bit underweight to the field on Gavin Williams as a result of an expectation that he's going to be a little bit limited here. I'm also on the same page with you. If I'm paying up for one pitcher, the one that makes the most sense is Andrew Abbott. Now, with that said, the one caveat to that is he's projected for 40% ownership. So I'm not all that different from the field. Are you taking like a massive overweight stance to Andrew Abbott, or are you more in line with the field, which for me, he's my most rostered pitcher in this price range, but that just means I'm kind of even with the field on somebody who's expected to be in about half of the field's lineups.
Yep, and that's where I am too, 44% with Andrew Abbott right now at the moment. John Gray, I'm undercutting amongst the popular pitchers. There's a lot of concerning stuff with John Gray. I will say no Taylor Ward in the lineup is definitely a plus, but we'll get into the ins and outs of that spot here too. I mean, there's going to be some upgraded strikeout potential than I was projecting earlier in the day. I'm rerunning some stuff with Keston Hiura and Rendon and a couple of these other guys that might make it look a little bit better for John Gray, but I understand why the ownership's coming in there. I'm just kind of spreading it out amongst some of these guys, and then a pretty large stance on Yelber Diaz.
All right, so let's talk about let's group all the 7 and 6K pitchers together. You already mentioned John Gray there. He's the chalk on the low end. On the high end, the chalk is Andrew Abbott. On the low end, the chalk is John Gray. He's going to be projected for 36% ownership on the road against the Los Angeles Angels. Like you said, watered down version of the Angels lineup. Of course, Mike Trout is not going to be back for another, month or so is what the Angels have said the timeline is. You got John Gray, also no Taylor Ward. He's 36% projected owned, like I mentioned. Chris Paddock against the White Sox, 15% ownership. Chris Flexen against the Twins, 8% owned. And then we've got Yelber Diaz, 16% owned against the Atlanta Braves. We'll talk about the 2 punt pitchers as a kind of separate discussion. So if you don't like John Gray quite as much as the field, which is kind of what you hinted at, or does that change now that Taylor Ward isn't in the lineup?
Yeah, Taylor Ward isn't in the lineup. And then Keston Hiura, who the whole point of him getting sent down was the fact that he just can't stop himself from striking out. Like, he is a walking strikeout. And now he's batting cleanup here in this spot. That was a little bit surprising to me. And so that's kind of the thing that's taking the most time. If you look at this season's numbers and all of 23 pitches, faced 7 batted balls, he only has a 20.5% K rate, but his career average, 35.8% K rate. I mean, that is about as hefty as you'll ever run into. 2020, 2021, 2022, we're sitting there 35, 39, 42% in that final year with Milwaukee. He is definitely somebody who likes to strike out, and now he is batting cleanup today. That kind of changed my tune a little bit on somebody that I was planning on undercutting pretty severely in John Gray, where I was like, oh, I'm going to get to like single digits of him. He's been brutal of late. He's had some massive blowups against Baltimore and San Diego, and the Mets got after him pretty hard pretty recently. And the pitch count hasn't been crazy high, 73, 77 pitches. He's been pretty reduced in terms of what that pitch count is, but you put him in for 80 pitches against the Angels here against this lineup, and it's still going to look okay for me. But I just reran some stuff. I got 22% of him here in this last run, but do you have any John Gray look? He's the second most popular pitcher and the guy pulling tons of ownership. And I just kind of prefer to spread it amongst some of these other guys where I think there might actually be decent enough spots for even like a Feltner in Cincinnati with the strikeout rate that they have against righties. Gavin Williams, I think the pitch count's concerning to me, but like Yelber Diaz, I really like. Hyder Montero has been your dude. What are you doing with John Gray?
Yeah, so the 2 most popular pitchers on the slate, John Gray, Andrew Abbott. I don't really have a massive stand here. I have both of them in right around 40% of my lineups, making me about even with the field on each of them. There are some lower owned pitchers that I'm taking a slightly overweight stance to, but I'm with you. I'm kind of spreading out a pitcher today. There's not like one guy. Earlier in the day, I had Chris Sale in 3/4 of my lineups.
Yep.
but now he isn't there anymore. I don't really like these pitching options on the whole. And the guys that I do think are reasonable, like Andrew Abbott, John Gray, that's your cash game pitching combination,
Yep.
Gray and Abbott. I just think the ownership is appropriate.
Yep, I'm with you. And now it becomes a little bit like put the dice in the old Yahtzee can and shake it up, and hopefully it lands out correct, because, I'm going to make a case for being overweight to certain guys, but there is some definite smackdown potential for everybody on this slate, including Andrew Abbott, where the ballpark and the weather can definitely get after you too.
So let's talk about some contrarian options in this pricing range then. If we are about even with the field on John Gray and Andrew Abbott, is there any contrarian option in this pricing range that you're liking?
Yeah, I like Yenner Diaz. I mean, you go to some of his AAA numbers, and it is just kind of crazy how many strikeouts he's getting. North of a 30% K rate at AAA, and playing in Reno. I mean, this is really hard to think that it's going to carry over and sustain like that. I mean, he's been around like, what, 23, 24% as you're looking at Steamer, as you're looking at Zips and such, but that's still pretty decent stuff. And Atlanta against righties, they've been a little bit worse than people expected, like a lot bit worse than people expected. 95 WRC plus here. You go for a more recent sample size, it gets even worse there, relying on Jared Kelenic. Matt Olson did end up going yard here on yesterday, and you're starting to see signs of life from him and Austin Riley and some of these other pieces, but no doubt that Atlanta has not performed up to expectations, and maybe Gilbert Diaz shows up and he's just got strikeout stuff right out of the gate. I don't think that's going to be the case, but there's not a lot of risk, I think, just taking a shot on a guy at 6K here, where, Feltner is there at 5,500, more of a known quantity, but freaky spot in Cincinnati, a spot I want to be invested. On the other side of that one, Gilbert Diaz, kind of like getting overweight to him, currently in 28% of my lineups.
Yeah, I like both sides of the game you just mentioned,
Same.
both Ryan Feltner as well as the Cincinnati Reds. And a part of it's certainly an ownership play. We don't have all that much ownership projected to go to Feltner relative to this size slate, right? It's not like you're going to get somebody who's 1% owned at pitcher like we see on some of these other slates that are bigger. But here's what stands out about Ryan Feltner. While he does have the 5.6 ERA, keep in mind, he does make half his starts at Coors Field, and his underlying numbers are pretty solid. 4.14 expected ERA, 4.12 FIP. His strikeout rate, 19.3%. That's certainly not great. But once again, when you consider that he does have to make half his starts at Coors Field, if you look at some of his splits for the year, he has pitched better overall on the road. And that is something that probably not totally unexpected, right? You taking him out of Coors Field. Now, this is still a very hitter-friendly ballpark. He's going to be pitching in Cincinnati, but it's still quite the park upgrade for Feltner. Not going to say I feel great about him, but just in the interest of trying to find some potential contrarian angles, we've got the Reds as one of the most popular stacks on the slate, and justifiably so. I do think it's a stack to be getting to, but I am overweight to Ryan Feltner. He is in about a quarter of my lineups.
That makes sense to me too. I've got him in 20, so I mean, I'm at the field with him, but I like getting to the Cincinnati side of things, but it wouldn't shock me to have Ryan Feltner get out of Coors, and the ball's going to break a little bit more on that slider, changeup, sinker, curveball, sweeper. You go through his entire pitch portfolio, and he's just throwing so much stuff. I think the changeup is going to continue to be the feast or famine pitch. When it's on, he's going to get a lot of swing and miss from lefties. When it's off, it's going to get hit like a piñata. I mean, he's got a 333 batting average against it so far this season with a 38.3% whiff percentage. Pretty gigantic difference. So, I mean, yeah, it's going to probably lead to some issues, but it's also doing a really good job of producing some type of swing and miss. So if you can get ahead in some counts, I could see this being a spot against Cincinnati. We know that they strike out a ton against everybody. 26% K rate against righties, 84 WRC plus. Have struggled a little bit to hit at home. I don't expect that to continue, but less real estate out there, so they kind of have to do it from a power perspective.
Are there any other pitchers in this pricing range that are interesting for you for any reason? If not, we'll talk about the garbage punt guys.
Hyder Montero. It's 4K. We don't really need it. When you have Feltner, you have Diaz, you have no expensive pitcher to pay up for, but that makes me think that we could get a really, really low ownership on a guy where his top two value percentage is nearly 50%. And Cleveland is not a team that you want to go out of your way to pick on from a strikeout perspective. They're second best at avoiding strikeouts against righties this season. But Montero's had strikeout stuff at AAA. We're seeing some signs of him being all right. And you want to just like leave a bunch of salary and have very, very different lineups today. I mean, Kiner Montero, I have no pitch count concerns for him. He had 94 against Philadelphia in his second start. He's just been bad so far, but still 5, 6, 4 strikeouts against Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Minnesota. Cleveland, the wind is blowing in from right field, but it's played way, way up for lefty power this season because of those banners getting removed. Not sure what the wind in is necessarily going to do here, but maybe it keeps a couple of balls that would be hit by these lefties in the park. And well, he's had decent strikeout stuff at AAA.
Yeah, it's certainly not necessary. Like, you'd never consider him in a small field tournament. You wouldn't consider him in cash games or anything like that. The sole reason that I get to Montero really at all in large field tournaments is because he is projected for the second least amount of ownership of any pitcher on the slate. The only one who's lesser owned is Chris Flexen. And you got the Guardians on the other side, who are right in line with the Reds as the second most popular stack. So there's leverage there. It's baseball. Random shit happens. I've got Montero in 20% of my lineups. I fully expect him to get hit hard and not pitch well. But considering the size of the slate, he probably should be higher than sub 10% owned.
Oh, definitely should be, but he's not. And as such, you know, we're going to see Andrew Abbott. I would be shocked if Andrew Abbott was sub 50% on this slate, wouldn't you?
No.
Really? That's interesting. That makes me want to like jam Abbott.
I would guess Abbott comes in, I mean, close to our ownership projection, maybe a little bit higher, like low to mid 40%.
Interesting. If that's the case, I'm going to play a lot more Andrew Abbott. I'm just going to probably give him a little bit of a boost and just live with the result of that one. I think he's by far the best pitcher on this slate. Davis Daniel, the jury's still out, I suppose. He's a righty going up against a Texas team that struggled against righties. 90, what? It's been right around like where's the exact number that I had? Let me find it. Texas 93 WRC plus on the season against righties. And it's just, you know, outside of Seager, everybody's kind of had some issues there. I mean, Josh Smith, I'm seeing in the chat from Sean V. So way to put the jinx on him today. Adolis Garcia got a mental health day yesterday, but you get Jankowski at the bottom of this lineup, Leedy Taveras. I mean, for me, I'm probably going to just be flat here at pitcher. I'm trying to make stands and like, I feel like Andrew Abbott's somebody though that amongst the talent on this slate, I think he's by far the most talented from 2023. We haven't seen the strikeout stuff as much here, but here against Colorado, as good of a spot as any, I think he should be the guy with the highest projection on this slate by a pretty considerable margin.
Yeah, and in small field tournaments and single entry stuff, he is going to be massively popular in those. But large field GPPs, I would expect somewhere around like 40 to 45% ownership.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay.
We got a super chat from Mile High 5280. There is no question attached there. So Mile High, if you meant to leave a question, you don't have to leave another super chat. Just throw it into YouTube. I'm on the lookout for it, and I'll answer whatever it is. But if you just wanted to leave us money, thank you. We appreciate having the support there. Anybody else who wants to help us out, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Anything else you want to talk about as far as DK pitchers go, Eric? If not, we'll look at the FanDuel side of things.
Now let's jump over to FanDuel.
Oh, there we go. Mile High said, talk to me about Williams. I like his upside.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so you might have missed at the top of the show, we talked about Gavin Williams. He's only making his second start of the season. He opened the year on the injured list. Then he was pitching in the minor leagues. Here's what's hard about the upside is capped because he has a pitch restriction. That just caps your upside.
And again, what that pitch restriction is, I don't think we have like a ton of clarity about it. It's kind of assumed. I mean, he did not pitch very well, got hit up, got pulled for all intents and purposes. But you go to his AAA numbers, 3.93 xFIP in 5 starts that he's had there, but he didn't throw any innings whatsoever. So there's definitely some type of pitch restriction. It's elbow surgery. It's a high velocity arm too. I think that matters. Somebody who's throwing it 96, 97 to truly be effective at the big league level, or to be, you know, potentially like a more elite arm. He's a big guy. I see what you're saying, because again, it's Detroit on the other side, but I can't get carried away. If you're playing one lineup, maybe you could make the case for it, but He's 8,500. I prefer cheaper arms. We have John Gray now in an awesome strikeout spot that I didn't really expect to see coming. No Taylor Ward, Keston Hiura batting cleanup. Lots of things have changed there. Anthony Rendon, who's dust and has no homers in like 75 plate appearances. Everything about his spot, I prioritize over Gavin Williams now. So like the contrarian idea of getting to Williams, it's kind of gone for me.
And one question for you too, before we talk about the FanDuel pitchers, if the answer is none, that's totally okay. Whether it's PrizePicks, Underdog, Pick Six, is there anything that you're liking from the pick'em market?
Yeah, so in the pick'em market, you go to DraftKings Pick Six. It's a stable market. Once the numbers get released, they don't change. So that should just have alarm bells going off in your head when you get a quality starter like Chris Sale removed. So I'm pulling up my Pick Six cards now because Corbin Carroll, I was able on PrizePicks to be able to get 5.5. I was able to get 5.5 for Christian Walker. I ended up jamming a lot of those 5.5s, pieced it together with some other plays that were at the top of our PrizePicks tool and kind of like threw those together. And I did that. The lines were up for about 15 minutes before they pulled them off the board, which is just so different than NBA where they'll get ripped off immediately. But on Pick Six, they introduced a lot of that market already. So you want to be paying attention. Corbin Carroll and Ketel Marte and Christian Walker, 6.5, 7.5, 6.5 respectively, going up against Bryce Elder now. That's a lot different than taking on Chris Sale. So those numbers have changed. I think Lourdes Gurriel and Ketel Marte, 1.5 hits plus runs plus RBIs for both of them. Those are things you want to be intertwining with your cards because if people have already built them for today, which happens more on Pick Six than what I think you would think it does, you really want to be overweight to that spot. I'm overweight to it big time today.
Yeah, we had Jake Nunnally in chat said he just joined. What happened to Chris Sale? Got scratched from his start. No injury or anything. They just pushed him back to tomorrow. Did you see a definitive reason why they're doing that?
No, but sometimes this time of year, if you don't want them to pitch in the All-Star game, or my assumption is that he's going to pitch in the All-Star game and they just want it to match up perfectly with his start. So they're moving him to Tuesday so he can pitch in the All-Star game next Tuesday on an extra day of rest. And he doesn't have 8 days off between throwing.
Makes sense. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that angle. That probably is the one that makes the most sense, especially when you consider the All-Star reserves were announced today, were they not?
Correct.
Yeah, so the time it would work out as well. If it was related to the All-Star game, it would make sense that they would make that decision shortly after it was announced he was an All-Star.
Yep. And then you always want to have your number one. If you can set it up in some way to have your number one pitch on the weekend coming in, giving him an extra day of rest now before his final start, before you get to the break, it's more advantageous, I think, to the ball club. Also, Chris Sale, as far as length, let's say Chris Sale gets hit up in the first game of this one. He is your ace. Like, he's the guy that you expect to be eating up innings. But if you have to use the bullpen heavily in a game that he's involved with in the first of a series, you're diminishing your expected win percentage going forward in that series with every subsequent pitcher. So you might as well wait at least one game when you know he only has one more start before the All-Star break.
All right, let's look at the FanDuel pitchers, and then we'll talk about our favorite stacks for the day. Jordan won't build lineups in the lineup generator today with it being the smaller slate. But if you guys do want to sign up for the lineup generator or any of the other tools that we have here at Stokastic, sign up using the links that we have below in the YouTube description box. And any package you sign up for, it does come with access to Discord. If you sign up for the lineup generator, if you sign up for a data package, or if you sign up for any of our Sims packages. So let's look at FanDuel pitchers, Eric. And here's what's different about FanDuel. Andrew Abbott is $9,500 as opposed to the $8,500 he is over on DraftKings. Chris Paddock is $9,000. And there's a pretty big drop off where you get to Davis Daniel at $8,200. He's the only pitcher in the 8K price range over on FanDuel. If you're rostering one pitcher for FanDuel, who are you going to, Eric? Because Abbott is more expensive and he's also 31% owned on FanDuel.
Yeah, he's really, really, really popular over there. I'd be looking potentially at a Yelber Diaz. I mean, most of the time I think he gets completely shelled. But the strikeout stuff is there and you never know. If you have north of a 30% strikeout rate at 7,500 feet or whatever Reno's at, I know it's well above sea level and it's above Denver, but Yelber Diaz sitting there at 6,500, you could basically play all the big boppers. You could get to the Corey Seagers, the Ellie De La Cruzes of the world. There's not a ton that I would be trying to like force in on the bottom. I mean, for me, Andrew Abbott, John Gray, I think they're rightfully pulling around 50% of the ownership. I'm a little surprised to see Davis Daniel at 8,200 pulling that much ownership. I mean, he had one really good start against Detroit. Then he goes up against Oakland, gives up 4 earned. I mean, he's had a pretty good start, but also he's had 2 pretty good matchups to kick off his big league career. So he's probably the one pitcher that I can make the case for getting to more Texas bats today. That's kind of my plan for it. Weird to see 21.5% ownership for him on FanDuel.
Yeah, I like Texas quite a bit. I mean, I played, his last start was against Oakland. I played Oakland in single entry that start, if I remember correctly, against Davis Daniel. So I am certainly not afraid to stack Texas Rangers against him. I saw people in chat bring it up as well. I think it was, Nicholas Robertson said, Greg, how the fuck is Davis Daniel top pitcher today? Well, part of it's because of the size of the slate and the lack of good pitching options. But I agree that he is way too popular for today. I much prefer stacking against him than rostering him with this kind of ownership. So he's actually the pitcher I have the biggest underweight stand to on the slate. And when we talk about offenses, the Rangers are my most stacked team overall. If I'm rostering one pitcher on FanDuel in a GPP, give me John Gray. He's less popular than Davis Daniel. He's less popular than Andrew Abbott, and he's super cheap at $7,300. You can play Gray at pitcher at relatively modest ownership, a great price tag, and play whoever you want at offense.
Yeah, and again, the upgraded strikeout stuff here. I don't think I can emphasize that for you enough. Keston Hiura is batting cleanup. Keston Hiura the only reason he's not in the league is the fact that he struck out like Joey Gallo on crack. Like the guy has north of a 35% K rate. Yeah, 35% K rate on this or for his career. North of a 40% K rate his last time up in the bigs, his last season in 2022. So for me, looking at him batting cleanup, there's like 1.5 Ks baked into that for me. It's so hard to get away from, that's over the course of the entire baseball game for what it's worth. So it's maybe worth like 0.8 to a guy like John Gray, but what an unbelievable lineup for him to walk into. I mean, this is like the best case scenario. You haven't had Trout there forever, but no Taylor Ward in this thing either, getting a day off, a big upgrade.
We got a question in the chat, which I think is a good one that I probably should have asked you about. So I'm happy that Big Kev 777 brought it up. He wants to know, what are we expecting from pitches out of Chris Paddock today? Because this is such a weird slate in terms of pitchers that haven't pitched a lot this year, or just guys that are coming right off the injured list or recently on the injured list. But yeah, Chris Paddock is making his first start in close to a month. And just like some of the other pitchers here, it's kind of unknown what his pitch count's going to be. I'm expecting somewhere around like 70 to 75.
Yeah, I'm not really playing a lot of Chris Paddock. He's probably the one guy we didn't talk about. It's because I don't think I have 8%. He's at 4%. So I guess I'm double the field sorry, that's FanDuel. I'm looking at the wrong spot. 17% Chris Paddock. Yeah, that's too much for me. I'm going to be well underweight to that.
Let's see. What do I have of Paddock? I have 5% Chris Paddock. Not somebody I'm all that interested in. The 2 biggest underweight stands I had, number 1, like I said, is Davis Daniel pitcher. Number 2 is Chris Paddock. We've got Davis Daniel project for ownership in the mid 20% range. I have 8% of him. And then we got Chris Paddock close to 20% ownership. I have 5% of him. And then in turn, that's where I get overweight to guys like, Ryan Feltner or Keider Montero instead. I don't love those guys either, but at least with Davis, I don't think Davis Daniel is any better than like a Ryan Feltner or Keider Montero. I think he's right in the same bucket with those guys. Davis Daniel is. And then Chris Paddock, I think we just have pitch restriction issues.
Correct.
Anything else you want to add about pitchers?
I will say this. I'm kind of doing some shopping right now. I'm trying to figure out exactly how I want to capitalize on John Gray with this lineup, because I think I have a higher K rate than I was expecting. I'm probably going to be around the field when it's all said and done on a guy that I was looking at shorting, but 4.5 strikeouts for him, sitting -135. ESPN Bet currently the best line for that. If you're looking for a pick'em play of some sort, there were 4.5 sitting there over on an underdog for quite a while. I wish I had jumped on that. I think it's up to 5 here now, but trying to do some work here for our sponsor. I know on pick 6, though, it didn't change. 4.5 is going to look really, really good by the time first pitch comes around. Actually, yeah, it's gotten reduced. So it is available at 4.5 over on underdog, but it's at 0.85x higher. So I probably would not be touching that. I'd be more inclined to go to the 5.5 strikeouts at 1.25 if you're going to look at anything over on underdog.
Let's talk about stacks. First thing I want to ask you, which team do you have the most exposure to in large field tournaments? And then we'll talk about single entry after.
The Minnesota Twins.
Okay, it is the Texas Rangers for myself. Let me know why it is the Twins for you.
Yeah, Minnesota Twins get Chris Flexen, and they throw out a ton of lefties here. Matt Wallner batting ninth. I do actually like under 0.5 hits plus runs plus RBIs for him for whatever it's worth. He's probably going to get pinch hit for at some point at the bottom of that lineup, but as it stands right now, I like a lot of what we're looking at from a power perspective. Chris Flexen has over a 300, yes, 300 ISO against lefties. It's 80 degrees, 70% humidity there in Chicago, so not terrible hitting conditions. They have the highest implied total on this slate, even after the removal of Chris Sale on that slate. It's not like Arizona's implied total ended up going up to the moon or anything. It's still a spot for me where Minnesota, I really like this lineup to perform here today with the number of lefties, specifically Larnach, Kepler. I think we're going to get decent enough ownership on those bats specifically that I want to get a lot of them.
So the issue I have with the Twins is really just the ownership. They're the most popular offense on the slate by a fairly decent margin. They're projected for 17% ownership. The next most popular team is now the Reds at 13.5% and the Guardians at 13.4%. So there's kind of tiers to ownership. Twins way at the top. Then you get the Reds and the Guardians. Then you get the Rangers and the Braves. Then you get the Rockies and the Diamondbacks, and then it's the Tigers, the White Sox, the Angels, the rest of the crew. So I do think the Twins are the best overall stack on the slate. They're just a good amount more popular than everybody else. That prevents me from making them my most roster team. Still getting a decent amount of them, not quite as much as the field. For me, the Texas Rangers, of the offenses that are in the best spots, I'll group them together. I think it's the Braves, the Rangers, the Guardians, the Reds, the Twins. Those five. The field sees it the same way. Those are all the teams that are double-digit owned. And of those teams, only one of them is going up against a chalk pitcher, and that's the Texas Rangers against Davis Daniel, project for mid-20% ownership. And if you look at Davis Daniel so far in the big leagues, he's only made 2 starts. So, like, what information could we really pull from this? No. In AAA, however, he made 14 starts, and they didn't go great. 5.33 ERA, 3.72 FIP, 4.66 XFIP. And then if you look back at some of the other sample size we have him in the minor leagues, it's also not great. He hardly pitched in the minor leagues last year. But you go back to 2022, and he had a 4.49 ERA and a 5.1 FIP in AAA. In 2021 in AAA, he had a 10.29 ERA, a 6.98 FIP. He is 27 years old. He's not really somebody who's considered an actual prospect. And he's generally gotten hit really hard in the minor leagues. Another one of these pitchers who is just not good in the minor leagues, gets called up to the big leagues, and then probably ends up flaming out along with a lot of these other guys. So I really think this is a good spot for the Rangers, and you're getting the added benefit of Davis Daniels being weirdly chalky.
I'm with you. They're my second highest owned stack, so I didn't want to interrupt you there. Good points.
Single entry. Is it different for you? Is it still the Twins for you in single entry? Or is there a different direction you'd be looking to go?
No, I'd be looking either at Texas or I'm going to throw this out there because I think I am on a different planet than you when it comes to Andrew Abbott. I think he's going to be very, 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 very popular. I'm playing one single entry lineup. I think I'm going to stack up Colorado. I think Colorado is going to be my 5-man going up against Andrew Abbott. It's great hitting weather. It's 88 degrees, wind ever so slightly out, maybe a little to the left. And you get a lot of righties to go along with Charlie Blackmon and Ryan McMahon, who I have no problem stacking up there. But I do think Andrew Abbott in single entry is going to push 60%. I'm pretty convinced that because his projection difference most everywhere is 2.5. I mean, we're going to see some pretty pronounced chalk on Andrew Abbott. I think Colorado's like the single entry team to roster up.
Yeah, no, I'm playing the Rockies in single entry as well. And I do agree. In large field GPPs, I don't think we're going to see 60% owned Andrew Abbott. I do think he's going to be 70% owned in single entry and smaller field stuff. And with that being the case, when I run stuff the way I do through the contest generator and the Sims, and I manipulate some of the ownerships of players to make it more similar to what I think is going to be in single entry, it pushes me to the Rockies. And I do think the Rockies are a pretty good leverage stack for large field tournaments as well, because you're going to have Abbott still as the most popular pitcher on the slate. But yeah, particularly for single entry, it's just really an ownership thing. It's not like I expect the Rockies to have success more often than not. I just think the ownership's going to be really out of whack.
I'm with you.
Are there any offenses that are really popular that you are underweight to the field on?
Yeah, there's the one that we just want to highlight and point at. I think Cleveland is pretty hefty in terms of ownership. Detroit, this is in Detroit, it's not a great ballpark. That wind blowing in from right field. It is a little bit strange to me to see as much ownership coming in. I guess it's Kiter Montero. He's been bad so far. But I don't know. This just feels like one of those spots where we know the ownership's going to come in on Quan, Ramirez, Naylor. It's routinely been. I think I want to be getting myself away from it, but yeah, it's kind of a spot where it's just a little bit too popular for me. I don't have any like crazy problem if you wanted to be stacking them up in large field and throwing it together, but like for one lineup or 20 max or single entry, just not the ballpark or game environment I want the most.
Yeah, so I am not like I'm a little bit underweight to the Twins, but it's still one of my most stacked offenses. Let's see, what else do I come in underweight to? So other just comparing some of the ownership of offenses to what I have. So I am.
Also, we are at lock in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. 2 minutes and 30 seconds to lock.
I do come in underweight to the field on the Guardians, and not because of me thinking it's a bad spot for them or anything like that. It's just, once again, I think the team is a little bit too popular. I'm definitely nervous about the limited amount of Guardians exposure. I have a lot of them as one-offs, but not really 5-man stacks.
Gotcha.
Anything else that's popping up to you really meaningfully as far as your stacks go?
Not really. I mean, it's kind of like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Colorado in single entry, definitely the way that I want to go there. Cincinnati, it's very consolidated. Ellie De La Cruz has been brutal, but yet at the same time, he gets on and he steals a zillion, bajillion bags, and there's just nothing you can do about it other than like play some of him on every single slate. So I'm looking at him with what? 43 stolen bases now on the season through 90 games. I mean, this is just ridiculous what he's able to do and break slates by just doing silly things on the base paths. Now, Elias Diaz, pretty decent catching option. It's just one of those spots where I think this is the kind of slate where you're going to leave a lot of salary on the table. I'm just uploading everything here now and looks pretty flat to me outside of Minnesota, who I'm playing a lot of. I'm playing a lot of Texas. I'm playing quite a bit more Arizona now going up against Bryce Elder, although I don't want to go crazy picking on him. And it could be, it's somewhat abbreviated if they decide that they want to turn it over to the bullpen sooner. And then, Chris Sale, you got him on deck tomorrow to eat some innings for you. Yeah, I don't have a crazy problem with anything there. Are you doing any White Sox are the lowest owned, second lowest owned stack? Are you getting to any of them?
Let's see. Just uploaded my lineups. No, I don't have any White Sox 5-man stacks. My top 150
I have
lineups.
1 in 150. 1 in 150 for me, and that was the last thing to point out.
Yeah, no, not for me. I've got Texas Rangers, my most rostered team. They are in 28% of my lineups as a 5-man stack. Then I've got double-digit exposure as well to the Atlanta Braves, Colorado Rockies, Minnesota Twins. With that said, a little bit underweight to Minnesota, just under 10% of the Cincinnati Reds. So that's where I'm at here. But hit us with it real quick before we close out here, Eric. Who's the dong pick of the day? We're not going to have time to read off everybody in chats before we get to lock. But what are you going with for a home run pick?
Elias Diaz plus 540 going up against Andrew Abbott here. Small ballpark, a lot of power here. It's down to plus 480. Pretty happy to be having that one. I get Elias Diaz has been brutal, 33.2% hard hit, 349 expected slugging, but positive regression is coming for the guy who had a 725 OPS last season and has a 782 OPS this season. Just hitting for more average. Time to see some power to go with it.
My most rostered hitter on the slate, it is Adolis Garcia. So that's going to be my home run pick, going with Adolis Garcia. For everybody, thank you for watching. Only a 5-game slate. It did end up being interesting with Chris Sale being scratched. Thank you very much for watching. Shout out to Underdog for sponsoring the show. If you guys haven't checked out Underdog, go and sign up with the link we have below. Get up to $100 bonus on your first deposit over there. And then also there's free squares aplenty over on Underdog. They've got best ball drafts. We got free best ball projections over at Stochastic. So check out all of that. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you back here tomorrow.